Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar, Writing a Successful Program Proposal from our GLACUHO Conference Host Committee. My name is Jeremy Alexander, and I'm your GLACUHO Technology Coordinator, and I'm hosted at Eastern Illinois University, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items to help you maximize your learning from this session. To ask questions, please use the Q&A section at the bottom of your window. The presenters will answer the questions as quickly as possible, but we want to make sure that we have enough time to cover all of the materials. Should you experience any problems, please type in the chat box and I'll work to assist you in resolving that issue. At the end of the session, the presentation and recording will be available on our GLACUHO website at glacuho.org under the webinar resource section for your future reference. And you can also share this with any of your colleagues who are unable to attend. At this time, I'll turn it over to our panelists who will get us started today. Amy?
Thank you, Jeremy. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy, and I am one of the folks on the GLACUHO Conference Host Committee. So today, like Jeremy said, we are going to be talking about how to write a successful program proposal, and we'll be giving some tips and tricks on how to make it successful. So first, a quick overview of our presentation today. We will start with introductions of the folks on our programming subcommittee and who we are. Then we are going to jump into the timeline of what it looks like to submit a program proposal. We'll talk a little bit about some ideas, how to generate ideas for your program, as well as how to connect with co-presenters if you're interested in presenting with someone else. Then we are going to dive into what makes a program proposal great and what makes that session great, as well as the rubric that we as a conference host committee use to evaluate program proposals. Then we'll jump into the program proposal itself, the ins and outs of what that is and what it looks like, and provide an example of a successful program proposal that has been done in the past. And then at the end, we'll have some time to answer some more in-depth questions, but feel free to put things in the chat as we go. So first, as I said, my name is Amy Brown. I am currently a residence hall director at Xavier University, and I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the chair of the programming subcommittee within the conference host committee. And I will pass it off to Sean.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Shaptowski. I am an assistant director for curriculum and assessment at Ball State University. I've been here now I'm in my 6th school year. I've been involved in GLACUHO since graduate school, so about 8 years total being involved in GLACUHO. I'm on the programming subcommittee for the conference host committee, and I do have experience presenting at GLACUHO conferences. I presented when I was a member of the Safety and Crisis Management Committee. I also served on a panel 1 year. So excited to be with you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashlyn Straka. I'm a graduate hall director at Northern Illinois University, and I am also a part of the programming subcommittee for the conference host committee as well. And this is my 2nd year being involved with GLACUHO.
So first, we're gonna just go through the timeline here. So program proposals are open now, as hopefully you're aware. We sent out call outs on March 3rd, April 4th, and May 5th, and they are due coming up on June 6th, and at 11:59 p.m. is when you need to have proposals in. At that point, our committee will review all proposals. So through the month of June, we will review them and select ones that reflect the diverse needs and interests of our region. And then once we do that, everybody that has submitted will get a decision notice. And those are announced late July to early August. And Jeremy just dropped that link in the chat. Thank you, Jeremy. So go ahead and take a look there. After that, our committee will share details about the conference specifics and updates leading up to the start of the conference. you know, like anything else, when planning a large conference, things are going to shift and change. So once our schedule is set, that will be communicated to you, you know, when you present, where your presentation is, and any changes that happen leading up till November. We will keep in good communication with you.
Okay, so maybe you've decided that you want to, you know, present a program at GLACUHO, or you're thinking about it, but you're maybe not sure like what you want to present on. So a few ideas of different things that you could present a program on. So maybe you have a personal passion for something, like a specific topic area, or a concept that relates to professionals in our field. Maybe that's something like budgeting or goal setting, maybe a dissertation topic, or other personal and professional growth areas. You could present on that. Maybe it's something innovative practices or processes. So maybe something that your institution or department or area does that's well. Maybe it's something that is unique that you all do. Or like, what are their innovative solutions that you have for common issues? How do you serve unique student populations, stuff like that. Or maybe it's state and regional issues. So maybe those laws or practices that impact our work, such as the legalization of marijuana, retention and funding practices. Or maybe you could do something that relates to national regulations and trends, something that like grows and changes over time. So Title IX regulations, the rise in mental health issues, or post-pandemic trends.
Once you've figured out some sort of area that you would like to present on, or if you haven't figured it out and want to work with someone to come up with those ideas together, there are quite a few different ways that you can find a co-presenter for the conference. I want to preface though, if you are comfortable speaking by yourself and you want to present by yourself, we have plenty of presenters who do that. But oftentimes for first-time presenters or folks that have less experience, it can be a lot more comfortable to have someone to bounce off of and present together. The easiest way to find a co-presenter is to look at the colleagues at your institution, or potentially colleagues that you've had at past institutions. These are great people because you already have that relationship typically with them, so you might be a little bit more comfortable presenting with them. And you can also share unique things about your institution or practices that you've done together, and it really allows for that natural flow with the topics. If you don't have a specific colleague that maybe you want to present with, you can always outreach to other areas. If you serve on a GLACUHO committee or a committee in another professional area, those are great folks to connect with. If you are on the health and wellness committee, maybe you could present on burnout with one of your committee members, or something similar that you all have similar interests with. You can also reach out to other professional groups. So if you were involved in a national group or within a GLACUHO just outside of GLACUHO, those are some great groups to get connected with, as well as groups within GLACUHO. So if you're involved in GLOW, that's the GLACUHO League of Women, there are some great women in that group that I'm sure would be interested in presenting with you. Social media is another option that we've seen a lot of people connect with co-presenters and find folks that would be interested in working on a proposal together. You can do something as simple as posting in the Res Life Professionals page on Facebook, or reaching out to folks that you haven't talked to in a while that you think would have some sort of similar interest or something that you would want to share with the GLACUHO region. And then finally, this year, as a conference host committee, we have come up with a presenter connection sheet. So this is just a Google sheet that folks can edit to share their contact information and connect with other interested presenters. So on this next slide, I will show you basically an example of what this looks like. And towards the end of our slideshow, we'll share all of these links with you, but for now, we'll just show you it on the slide. So this is our presenter connection sheet. Basically, all you have to do is fill out some information about yourself, what you're interested in presenting on, and then connect with other folks who have filled out the sheet. So you can see in the first few columns, it's just personal information like your name, email, and your professional level. And this is helpful for folks who maybe want to connect with folks in a similar level to them, or for people who might want to connect with, let's say I'm entry level and someone wants to connect with me because they're a senior housing officer or mid-level and want to kind of help bring some folks up into the presentation experience. So make sure to enter that. And then here in column E, you can fill out any topic ideas that you have, or notes on what you're interested in presenting. But if you have no idea what you want to present on, that is okay. Still fill out this sheet, and you can, just as I put in the example, you can say you're open to other topics, or you're interested in a wide variety of things, and you're willing to explore those options with someone who's interested. And then once you have entered your information, look through the sheet and see if there's anyone else that you might be interested in presenting with, and you can share your contact information there in column F. And the conference host committee will also be periodically checking this and connecting folks to each other. So I know a lot of people are busy with closing or getting ready for summer tasks and conferences. So if this maybe isn't at the top of your agenda this week, don't worry, we will also reach out to you all to make sure that you're seeing who has potentially connected with you.
So what makes a program great? We're just going to go through just some things to think about as you're putting through a proposal and as you're planning your actual material for the presentation. So engaging, right? I'm sure you've all sat through presentations of some kind. Obviously, you're in this webinar now, trying to just make sure it is engaging as possible. Trying to avoid just talking at the audience, but maybe throwing in some sort of activity, and just really thinking about what others in the region, what will interest them, and what topics and what kind of pedagogy or teaching style people will react to the best. So considering activities, discussions, reflections to engage audience members with the material will be really important to putting on a great presentation. So relevancy. We're also looking for proposals that are relevant to the region's needs and interest. Ashlyn talked about that a little bit. So what could folks benefit from? What innovative practices can institutions benefit from learning about? So clear objectives, really understanding the tangible outcomes or takeaways from your presentation. What our audience is going to learn? What are they going to gain from attending this session? And how they're going to learn that, thinking through that as well. And then making sure it is cohesive. So as you write your proposal, making sure to be consistent with your objectives throughout the process, developing those strategies that go towards meeting your objectives. So everything from your title, your abstract, your learning outcomes, and your outline should all line up to describe how you'll be covering and sharing your ideas and topics.
All right, so Amy mentioned earlier that the conference host committee uses a rubric when reviewing the different program proposals. So kind of just to go over what the committee looks for and like kind of what the rubric entails. So there are a few different areas. So the first one is content. So just making sure that it contains thorough and reliable information about the subject area and that it's clearly communicated with the information that's in the proposal. It should include learning outcomes. So that should include the well-developed learning outcomes and explain how the learning outcomes will be met throughout the presentation. The practical competencies related to the field. So it should articulate a clear connection to one of the GLACUHO competencies in knowledge domains and or the contemporary issue for the conference as well. It should have an innovative approach, so it should represent an innovative or creative approach to professional practices, theory, or research. And then there's theoretical and or practical foundation, so making sure that it's grounded in theoretical approach, or practical experiences. Organization, so making sure that it's detailed and organized, providing an accurate description of the presentation flow. Engagement, making sure that it's engaging the attendees across multiple learning styles and different presentation styles as well. And then inclusion and equity. So it should tangibly engage the audience in thinking about inclusive excellence pertaining to how social identities are represented in your content and presentation style, as well as your program acknowledges different types of implicit bias, stereotypes, and microaggressions.
Okay, now that you know what we're looking for in program proposals, maybe you've had a little bit of time to brainstorm or think about who you might want to reach out to for your presentation, we are going to do a deep dive into what the actual program proposal entails and the specific sections that you'll have to fill out when you're presenting your proposal to the committee. And this is all in a form which we will share with you again at the end of the presentation, but no need to copy and paste links just yet. So the first section is going to ask you to fill out some presenter contact information as well as demographic information. And this you will need to fill out for every single presenter. So if it's just you, all you need to know is your information. But if you're presenting with 2, 3, maybe even 4 other folks, it's important that you get their information as well and potentially fill this out together as a group. So you'll need some general information like your name, your institution, position, typical things about where you work and who you are, as well as your professional level and years of experience in the field. We'll need your contact information, obviously, so that we can contact you about your program proposal, provide feedback once we've reviewed them, as well as let you know whether or not you've been selected for the conference. We do ask you to include whether you've presented at conferences before, so whether it's a GLACUHO conference or other conferences, just because we want to get a depth of experience and include both first-time presenters as well as folks that have had a lot of presentations under their belt. And an important data point to point out to all of us is that typically we have at least 50% of our presenters being first-time presenters at the GLACUHO conference. So if you are a first-time presenter and you're a little bit nervous, please know that we are here to support you. And we are going to have a large community of other first-time presenters that can kind of help you through that experience, and we're happy to help.
So next is program information. And this becomes important because this is what participants will see in the program guide and on their guidebook app. So a relevant, attention-grabbing title, something that describes what your session is, but something that will also kind of catch participants' attention. And then the summary description, we ask that you be succinct, but accurately describe what you will do and cover in your session. Again, if you can make it catchy and attention grabbing, excuse me, that would be wonderful. So you can get as many people at your session as possible.
All right, and so I mentioned a little bit earlier about needing to include learning objectives in your program proposal. So you'll need to identify 3 learning objectives for your program. And essentially learning objectives should be statements of what participants will actually be able to get out of your session or leave knowing after you present to them. So we use these to select programs that meet the needs of our region. So it's super important that you would be able to list out 3 of those in your proposal as well. And then as far as, thinking about different learning outcomes, we recommend using Bloom's taxonomy. that can be helpful for writing specific and accurate learning outcomes. So you can select different action verbs that would match what would be covered in your presentation and what participants would be able to gain. And typically most sessions will only address the lower level of the Bloom's taxonomy with the allotted time, and that's okay. You don't have to worry about covering all of it, but we think that is helpful when identifying learning outcomes.
So once you've come up with your general ideas for your program, you've entered in the learning outcomes, the final content piece is to fill out the program outline. So a lot of us have had to do this in either grad school or college when we're writing papers and other things. It's really that simple. It is just an outline of what your presentation is going to be. So it doesn't need to be this in-depth, fully planned out program. You're not attaching a PowerPoint or anything like that. It really can just be kind of like a list of what you plan to cover and how you plan to cover it. It is important to consider kind of the flow of content and how you're going to be organizing that content within your presentation, because that will determine how participants potentially will learn and understand that content. As we've been talking about, a little bit of a broken record, please make it engaging, make sure that participants are able to engage with the material, reflect on it, whether that's through specific activities, reflection, maybe group discussion. Talk about in your outline what you plan to do to engage the participants. And then finally, you'll want to give a little bit of a time breakdown and how you're going to use that allotted time. It's important that you include this just because we can sometimes get a little overzealous and ambitious. And if you're only wanting to do a 60-minute presentation, but you have enough content for 3 hours, it's going to be a little hard to fit all of that in. So please be realistic as you're planning out your outline and include some of that time information. And speaking of times and session types, we do have a few different types of sessions that are pretty typical at the GLACUHO conference. I will say there are some more options on the proposal, but we're going to focus on the 4 types that are most common. If you have an idea for a session that doesn't necessarily fit into one of these types, please feel free to reach out to the programming subcommittee or the conference host committee as a whole, and we can kind of talk through what that session might look like or how we can include it in the conference. So the 4 main ones are a traditional presentation, extended traditional presentation, panel discussion, and roundtable discussion. Most presentations are going to fall within the traditional presentation option. So this is a typical 60-minute block, and it allows for presenters to share information in a wide variety of styles and formats. And the main focus of it is getting to share that information with the audience. The extended presentation is the same as the traditional, but you get a couple hours instead of just 1 hour. And this option is great if you're wanting to dive deeper into a subject matter, or you just know that you're not going to fit it in 60 minutes. And this is also great if you're trying to get a little bit higher on that Bloom's taxonomy that Ashlyn was talking about. Sometimes you might need an extended presentation. However, I would caution that you don't want to do just extended presentations because it does take up a decent chunk of the conference. So just be intentional if that is the option that you're going. We also have panel discussions and roundtable discussions, which are similar but a little bit different, so I can break it down. A panel discussion is where you have a set of experts or other individuals that have a lot of information about a specific topic or have personal experience with a specific topic. And so you can have some guided content for them to share their experiences, answer questions from the audience, and it's a highly engaging session where audience members can kind of direct their learning and involvement. And then a roundtable discussion is less of you presenting at people and more of, just like it sounds like, a discussion with participants. So obviously in your proposal, you'll need to include the general flow of what you're looking for in this roundtable discussion, specific questions and prompts that you want to include. But this will also be very guided by what participants talk about and what they want to learn and know.
So another important piece to consider is who your target audience is going to be. So who you want this session to mainly attract and who the material is going to be for. So ranging from graduate students to entry-level professionals to mid-level to senior housing officers. So grad students, thinking about those are folks, of course, who are balancing the classroom work with day-to-day implementation of housing operations. And then entry-level and support staff would be potentially included in that area, who are really focused also on day-to-day of housing operations. And then moving up to mid-level professionals, faculty, support staff who coordinate services and programs, oversee the implementation of the operation. And then finally, senior housing officers, so possibly some mid-level in there as well, mid-level to senior and senior academic partners who oversee development, direction, implementation. So that's going to be a piece that you need to identify, and then just something to think about as it relates to maybe what level you're at as well. Obviously, if you are a graduate student, maybe graduate students are a great audience to really think about, and as you move up, thinking about even a senior housing officer, they could definitely still do something for graduate students and entry level. So.
All right, and so as mentioned earlier, you will need to select a primary topic area for your program based on the GLACUHO competencies and knowledge domains, which you can see listed here. I'm not going to read them all off, but this will help participants identify the professional development areas that you intend to focus on. And then additionally, the program submission guide on the GLACUHO website has more information and links to specific examples for these subtopics as well that we can share later.
And then the final piece of the program proposal is the inclusion reflection. And the reason that we put this at the end is it should be incorporated, kind of inclusion and equity themes throughout the entirety of your presentation, and should be evident throughout your outline and learning outcomes, program description, and all of that. But this is your opportunity to really reflect on how your presentation addresses inclusion and equity. And if it doesn't, this is your opportunity to go back and make some changes to your presentation so that you are centering inclusion and equity within the content of your session. So obviously, inclusion and equity are central to the role of residence life professionals. And so that is why we've incorporated this into the program proposal. So this has been a kind of joint collaboration between the conference host committee, previously the programming and development committee, and also the inclusion and equity committees to include this question. And it is targeted at determining how each session will promote inclusive excellence. So as you can see, the question is here on the screen. I won't read it all, but basically you're focusing, you really need to describe a few ways that your program tangibly engages the audience in these topics, and how your program acknowledges differences or different types of implicit bias, stereotypes, and microaggressions, and how that is incorporated into the content. So I'm going to read GLACUHO's definition of inclusive excellence because I think this is important for you to know as you're reflecting on this question. And this definition is also in the proposal. But GLACUHO defines inclusive excellence as the recognition that a community or institution's success is dependent on how well it values, engages, and includes the rich diversity of students, staff, faculty, administrators, and alumni constituents. So as you're reflecting on this question, please make sure to be very intentional in what you're talking about, and that whatever you're talking about in this reflection is also reflected throughout your outline and learning outcomes. I will note that this question is now scored, so it is a part of the scored rubric. So it is important to be intentional with this and to have specific strategies and takeaways for your participants.
So here's an example. So each year at GLACUHO, we award, based on that scoring that Amy mentioned, the top 10 presentations from the conference. So an example here, the title was catchy, not another training montage, an RA training revamp with a 1-2 punch of outcomes and assessment. So it was clear what they're going to talk about, but also was creative as well. The summary provided accurate and a thorough description. And then the learning objectives were clear and very much achievable. So again, that summary is what we will see, what participants will see on the guidebook and on the conference guide. So I'll give you a second to read those, but oh, thanks, Amy. But yeah, just something to think about when it comes to title, summary, and learning objectives. And we go to the next one. And then just continuing on that, the inclusion and reflection. So how to incorporate DEI education through RA training instead of having a diversity day. So that was what they were thinking about. And then talking about collaboration across campus partners to ensure DEI education is trained properly. And then there's the outline, is detailed and demonstrates how the learning objectives will be achieved. So kind of the strategies for achieving that.
So like Amy mentioned before, a large amount of our presenters at GLACUHO are first-time presenters. So just a few tips for first-time presenters: co-present with a seasoned presenter so that they can help you along the way and guide you through that process. You can look at past conference presentations and winners for inspiration, like we just did. Review the program submission guide on the GLACUHO website. Spend time on your learning objectives and really make sure that you are being intentional with that. Be detailed in your outline, but don't have it all planned. Ask a former presenter to review your proposal. If selected, use the feedback provided by the conference host committee. Practice your presentation ahead of your session, and then just be yourself.
Thank you. So that is the content, the rest of the content of our webinar. We are going to have a little bit of time for questions, and then we can jump into the presenter connection sheet. Ashlyn, if you want to go ahead and drop the program submission guide and the presenter connection sheet into the chat so that participants have it. But these are two great resources for you. It has a lot of the information that was in this webinar, as well as additional details and tips and things that we haven't talked about today. On that program submission guide, we do have the link to the program proposal, to the presenter connection sheet, and to the nomination form. So as you're listening to this webinar or reviewing what you have decided for your program proposal, if you get some inspiration and think that someone else around you might be a great presenter, or maybe they need a little bit of a nudge to consider themselves as a presenter, we really encourage you to fill out that nomination form, and the conference host committee will reach out to those folks and let them know that they've been nominated. But we will now open it up for questions. If folks want to, they can either drop something in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you to ask a question. And as folks are potentially thinking of questions or reviewing this, if you want to go ahead and click on the link for the presenter connection form, and this is a great time for you to start filling out your information if you are interested in connecting. Also, if you are excited to go to the GLACUHO conference this year, please note that registration will be opening on Monday. So that is, I believe, the 15th. So if you want to get that on this fiscal year with your professional development funds, or you're just super excited like all of us on the conference host committee, we really encourage you to register early so that you can get that in and you don't have to think about it once it gets to the crazier times of August and September as we're preparing for students to come back on campus. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any questions today, but if you do think of things or you're watching this recorded, please feel free to reach out to the programming subcommittee. If you email programming@glacuho.org, that will get to us, and we can respond to any inquiries you have, questions, if you need some inspiration or just want to talk through an idea. But thank you for taking some time to listen to the webinar, engage with us, and please let us know if you have any questions.